let's move on out to the Conservative leadership race in Canada. So there were a few potential contenders that dropped out that I thought would be in this. Rona Ambrose comes to mind. But you have Peter MacKay now launching his bid, and it seems like, I don't know, what are your thoughts on this race and who may end up as the Conservative leader here? Because I just feel like it seems sort of obvious it might be him, but there could be others that are at play here.
Yeah, so like on my YouTube channel, and I know we talked about it like the election night, I think, but the day after the election, I'm like, Scheer's done. Like I don't know if it'll be right now or if it'll take a few months, but Scheer's done. There's no way he's staying on. No one likes him. The social conservatives questionably don't think he was social conservative enough, and the moderates think he was too social conservative. No one really seems to support him right now. The guy's done. And I said Peter MacKay is the most likely person to replace him. And I think that right now it does seem to be leaning towards MacKay, not a coronation, but a lot of people seem to be stepping aside. I mean, Jean Charest was going to run. He was a former progressive conservative leader, former Quebec Liberal premier. Rona Ambrose was the interim leader between Stephen Harper and Andrew Scheer. And a lot of people, neither you or I are conservatives or probably would ever vote conservative, but a lot of people gave her praise from an objective perspective for the job she did. And there was also Pierre Poilievre, not really well liked by most non-conservatives, but seen as, like a young force within his own party. All of these people were basically mulling a run. Poilievre and Charest were reportedly ready to announce, and they both at the last minute said no, and Rona Ambrose said no. And I wonder if there's a sort of an understanding that maybe Peter MacKay has something of a lock on this, and that there's no use, running versus him at this stage. And I think the narrative around MacKay, again, whether this is an accurate narrative or not, is that he's seen as something of a moderate. He's from the East Coast. He's from the Maritimes, and will have a better chance of appealing to voters outside of like the Western bubble. Because we have to remember that the Conservatives won the popular vote in the 2019 election. They won more votes than Justin Trudeau, but they won by such huge margins in Alberta and Saskatchewan that they wasted a lot of votes.
Yeah.
And so I bet there's it's like we need to get somebody who can win us some votes in Ontario, Quebec, and in, parts of the Maritimes and in parts of British Columbia where we lost some close elections, and that's our path to victory. We can't win any more seats in Saskatchewan. We can't win that many more in Manitoba even. We need to win seats in Eastern Canada. Maybe MacKay is the guy to do it. And I think that's one of the narratives that's growing out of this leadership race.
Do you think there is any fear or potential that with Peter MacKay potentially being the leader, that the Conservatives would lose their base that are socially conservative, because MacKay does seem to be a little more, moderate when it comes to issues like, gay marriage, for example. Where does that fit in? Are social conservatives enough of a contingent within Canada that they can actually, potentially destroy a race in 2 years, 3 years for the Conservatives if they don't vote for the Conservative Party?
I don't know if there's a risk that they'll lose their vote. I mean, technically, the PPC still technically exists for Americans who listen. We sort of have like a right-wing party called the People's Party. They ran in pretty much every riding last election, but didn't end up winning a seat. Their leader lost their seat. And so they're basically, I guess, kind of comatose right now, but they still technically exist. So you'd say maybe if there's enough disgruntlement with, say, somebody who's perceived as not conservative enough, they might go to that party. But I find that when conservatives are out of power, especially, they're less likely to splinter. So the broad history of the Conservative Party in Canada is that they were one of the two original parties like the Liberal Party. And they're, like the Liberal Party, they were sort of the only party that consistently existed in elections until the CCF-NDP was created in the 1930s. And Canada sort of became like a 3.5 party system. But in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a conservative government here in Canada under Brian Mulroney. And some conservatives, especially in the West, were discontented with that for a variety of reasons, social and economic, ideological reasons. And this led to the creation of the Reform Party / the Canadian Alliance, which was actually became bigger and more powerful than the original Conservative Party, which was called the Progressive Conservatives. And for about, I don't know, a decade or so, 15 years or so, they basically existed with two conservative parties in the country, and it pretty much guaranteed big liberal majorities every election. Like, that's what happened. Mm-hmm. And so eventually what happened is that in the early 2000s, Peter MacKay, the final leader of the Progressive Conservatives, and Stephen Harper, the final leader of like the Reform Alliance, merged the parties, and Harper became the first leader of that party and would form a nearly 10-year government under that unified Conservative Party, just called the Conservative Party of Canada. And so I don't think you're going to see a split of the Conservatives when they're out of power because they have a shared enemy. They will grumble about it, but at the end of the day, they'll line up behind whoever it is because they want to stop Trudeau. It's the same thing in Alberta, where the right-wing split in Alberta, the Wildrose split happened, a few years ago because there was a long conservative government in Alberta where a lot of right-wingers felt they were being taken for granted. But as soon as the NDP won, they within a year or two, they got right back together, and now they're merged again. And so I think if you're going to see a conservative exodus because of discontentment, it'll happen after some years of the Conservatives being in power.
Christo, where can people find you?
Well, people can find me on Twitter. It's just Christo Aivalis. David will have the name in the description. It's just that, all one word. Same thing on Facebook. You can find me there. YouTube, the channel's name is just Christo Aivalis. And you can find me covering Canadian politics more now lately because of the U.S. election. I've been talking a lot of Bernie Sanders. So I think if you like David's stuff, you'll probably like my stuff too.
That's true. Christo does awesome work. Check out his channel, subscribe, and again, I'll have all the links below in the description box. Check him out. Christo, thanks again.
Thanks for having me.